Hello, theology nerds. This is Tripp.
This is Bo.
It's the Theology Nerd Throwdown podcast.
And we are going to throw down.
That's right. And this week, just like all of this month, is brought to you by Chalice Press, the official publishing sponsor of Homebrewed Christianity, Theology Nerd Throwdown, and the rad people behind the new books, The Banned Questions About Christian, which is edited by our friend Christian Pyatt of the Homebrewed Culture Cast.
And we just want to say to the Culture Cast crew, it is nice to have you back. Welcome back to the airways.
Yes, definitely. Chalice Press has lots of great books, theological resources for good old nerds, preachers, church planters, and the like. It might just become your number one favorite progressive Christian publisher. Check them out, chalicepress.com. You can click a link on the website. You can also use it and get a good old discount where you buy Christian's new book, Banned Questions About Christians, which has answers from like a million different Christians answering the same questions people ask. And you go get it, and then you get the first two versions, or first two in the series, for free. The thing is, which is good because the first one is the best one because that's the one I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
That was before Christian fired.
That was my favorite.
I know. I mean, I'm not bitter that Christian cut me out of answering it in the future.
Well, your answers were too long. That's what I heard.
Were they?
You exceeded the word limit.
I may.
Well,
like,
it's your fault.
Answer something in 400 words.
Yeah.
And Bo's in his head goes, Tripp has it. Look, his 2,000 word blog post, I cut 2,000 words out of them.
Well, it's your fault for using the talk and type.
They are our sponsors, and that's all good. So head on over to homebrewedchristianity.com, and you can click that little link and get that little special deal. You can also know that they are even doing a giveaway. Free books. And here's what you need to do. You know how progressives aren't always really good at answering questions?
I have noticed that, yes.
You know, like liberal Christians, like you ask them a question, and then they basically tell you all the things they don't believe. Then they apologize for about to answer your question that's Christian. And then they say almost nothing. That is what I've heard from my evangelical friends. They're like, I don't even know what you're talking about.
I've talked to that same person.
Yeah, and then the atheist friends of mine, they're like, well, do you even believe anything different than me, or do you just like religious poetry? See, here's what we want to do. We want to give you free books by you calling in on the speak pipe to tell us questions that progressive Christians stumble over. Boom. You call it in. We're going to have a couple podcasts where we play some games, answering the questions, and then we're going to do a giveaway with some free books just for whoever name gets drawn out of my Dodgers hat.
All right. So questions that progressives have trouble answering, and you don't need to be progressive to submit a question. You could be very conservative or evangelical.
Those are probably more fun.
Oh, yeah. But if you have noticed that there's a question that your progressive friends have trouble answering, we want to hear it.
Definitely.
Hey, we got some live events coming up.
That's right. We got on the first week of March, we're going to be at Fuller Theological Seminary with Phyllis Tickle's last public appearance. So that's sort of fun. Head on over. On the podcast page, there'll be links to all the events. So we got Phyllis Tickle's last public event. Tony Jones is going to be there. We're going to have Homebrewed Christianity live podcast right there at the Breckle March Center at Fuller Seminary. And then we're going to have a TNT afterwards where I really do hope that a little game comes back out of the closet, Bo.
Au contraire, mon frere.
Yeah. It'll also be the release of a brand new beer brewed in Phyllis Tickle's honor. Oh, yeah.
Is that right?
Yes.
Oh, it sounds awesome.
It may be a Russian Imperial Stout using barrel staves from Jack Daniels, because we know how big a Jack Daniels fan she is. Anyway,
wow.
But you'll have to go see it. It's going to be. You have to be there to find out.
That's the beginning of March.
Then March 14th, there's going to be some fun right here at my own church.
Mm-hmm. A
whole day with Peter Rollins, hocus pocusing, and
doing some magic tricks.
That's right. The night before. If you show up and are taking the high gravity Atheism for Lent class, 6 weeks during Lent on Thursday nights, 90-minute sessions, video online reading group. We're gonna do that. Then we're gonna head over to a pub, hang out. Next day, all day event with Peter Rollins. I'll be here. Ryan Bell's coming over, the guy that has been making the rounds because he's living as an atheist for a year, which I'm interested in how to do that. He's going to tell us.
Wow.
So, because if you're doing Atheism for Lent, he started before us, so it might help us out.
He has a running start.
Yeah. Anyway, that night we're going over to Monkish Brewing Company for a little beer release that is Atheism for Lent themed.
That should be interesting.
A beer release
Yeah.
at Monkish.
Sounds great.
And this is exciting. I know for you. If you've been to homebrewed Christianity events before, but we always have lots of fun music.
Yeah, we do.
Now, what might have been the craziest musical moment?
Crazy.
Who is the kilted wonder?
Oh, yeah. When Daniel Bedingfield showed up one night, that got pretty wild.
Oh, yeah. And Daniel Bedingfield is coming with his guitar player to Monkish and is planning on doing some music for us. And I don't know if I can confirm that he's going to wear his kilt or not, but I'll just say the music is going to be outstanding. And Johnny's coming, and we may or may not be bringing a little dirty alt country cover of Stryper's Tale of the Devil out of the closet. So,
oh man!
So just saying that night's going to be exciting.
It's going to be the ruckus.
Yep, and then we will be headed over to Johnny and I to Chicago for a little special event. But I will let the senior deacon Tony Jones tell you about it.
Hello, deacons. This is Senior Deacon Tony Jones calling. The home-brewed Christianity deacons shall come out in force by divine fiat to the Progressive Youth Ministry Conference, the first conference of its kind gathering voices in the progressive youth ministry world. It's going to be epic. We want as many deacons as possible on site in Chicago. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to offer for a limited time a $50 coupon, a discount code HBCTNT. You got that right. You enter the discount code HBCTNT at the Progressive Youth Ministry site, and you will get $50 off. This conference is on its way to selling out, and I would just like as many deacons there as possible. So don't delay. Join Tripp and Johnny and Tony and a whole host of other deacons of the homebrewed variety at Progressive Youth Ministry in Chicago, March 19 through 21. Out.
That's a pretty sweet discount.
Yeah, so there you go. So you can go use the HBC TNT. It just sounds catchy.
Oh, yeah. We should have thought that up.
HBC TNT. $50 off. Yeah, we're going to do a live podcast there, and Johnny and I are both talking. So just know that I have a small little series of excursions planned to some
outings.
Yeah, to wonderful craft breweries in Chicago. So deacons, if you are in the area, you should go. If you're a youth minister and your church sends you to a conference every year, you should go this one.
Absolutely.
All right. So, Bo.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Okay.
I am very excited about. I told them some of the stuff that are coming in, but I had
a bunch of calls on the speak pipe, and we're going to try and go through as many as we can today. We get more than we could possibly use, but we love them. So keep sending them in.
Sometimes there's a bunch of them that overlap content-wise, so we just pick one.
Yeah, but a representative.
But this one, I wanted to watch Bo's faces. He listened to it.
Okay. Yeah, Tripp gets the advantage that...
Yeah, I do.
Hey, Bo and Tripp. This is Tyler from Iowa.
Hi, Tyler.
And
from Iowa.
This is my first time calling in on the speak pipe. Not really calling in at all, just leaving a message. And what I would first of all like to say is thanks a lot for all that you do. I really appreciate the perspective that you guys bring. It's fresh, it's new for people like me who have experienced kind of the same old mainline Christianity and have grown kind of tired of it and really didn't know of a better option than to maybe just walk away. The perspectives you guys provide and the guests that you have on really are refreshing. So first of all, thank you. Second of all, your most recent podcast that I listened to, you talked about how you wanted people to kind of go on the speak pipe and give a few potential questions or stumbling blocks that progressives might have towards either their more conservative evangelical friends or atheists. And the big thing that I have that I've run into as I've been listening to your podcast is by no means am I a theologian, but I would consider myself to be an educated person. And what I come away with at times is when I feel like things are flying over my head and you guys are dropping, different things along the lines of, well, the Pannenberg approach or the Neo-Derridian approach, or all these things. I'm sure your nerdier friends who are much smarter than I jive and track right along with that. But I get the feeling that there are times when certain things just fly over the head, and I got to believe that if there is such a thing as the gospel, it has to be something that can be understood by the most simple people on the planet. And that's I don't mean that offensively or anything like that. I just believe that there are people out there that aren't educated, that may even be illiterate. And how do you I guess live out the gospel or explain this gospel, this way of belief that makes sense to somebody who isn't well read, who has a difficult time understanding the concepts that you guys are throwing out? Because at the end of the day, progressive Christianity really can come across as just kind of an elitism. It's for people who are well read, who have the time to dedicate to getting their PhD in theology and that type of thing. Anyways, I'm kind of running along here, but I just kind of curious what you guys think about that.
All right, Bo.
Well, I do have some thoughts.
There you go. So, Tyler, thank you for calling and finishing 4 seconds before it cuts off. There's 3 minute max.
Well done, sir.
And I was rather impressed that you managed to hit the time spot like that.
Well, so 2 things come to mind immediately. The first is, you're right in some sense about, the lofty stuff when we talk about Pannenberg or the Neo-Derridian. Absolutely. And sometimes we don't take time. I mean, this is how we first got in contact with Mickey Jones, is she said, well, I love the TNT, but about half the time I just have to wait till you guys go to the next subject so I can jump back in. And this is how we first met Mickey, because she asked us to explain some things, and now she's a regular contributor, which is awesome. So yes, I'll concede. But here's the thing. You can't be all things to all people. So the very medium of a podcast means that, if there's a certain segment, a self-selecting segment of people who choose to listen to this, what our hope is that then they take the ingredients that we provide and go do something with it that is specific to their locale.
Yeah,
right.
So when people at our church listen, I have them listen there. I don't know what you were talking about on the podcast, but they like my sermon, kind of thing.
Oh, right.
Everyone talks differently.
Yeah, and both you and I are youth pastors, so we're talking to people without theological educations. I'm at a city church, so we have people, coming by of every stripe and education and economic level, and so you contextualize, the way you do it and how you interact with them. So, yeah, while I concede that there is an issue, I have to say also that the very nature of the medium is a self-selecting audience. So people who are listening, right, we're hoping that they take something and distill it down, right? So it comes in a bit of a concentrated form, and then they can, if they're interested in whatever we're talking about, they can pursue it on their own, look it up, distill it on their own and absorb it. But the other thing is, and this is something I have a little bit of a problem with, if I can be honest, Tyler. You said the gospel, but this is a theology nerd throwdown. So we're not talking only about the gospel, because, the gospel should be easy enough for anyone to understand. But the theological endeavor is not the simplicity of the gospel, which, by the way, doesn't necessarily need to be understood. It needs to be received. There's a huge difference going on there.
Yeah, like, 4 things came to my mind is, like, Tylenol works if you take it.
You don't have to understand.
You don't
how it
have
works.
to be able to explain it. Like, no one goes up to a pharmaceutical company and says, yeah, so, I went to your website, where it explains the science behind, your blah, 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 blah. And it's just, so I think there's a sense in which, when you're talking about the gospel,
if you eat something and it fills you up, and then you read the ingredients and you say, well, I don't know all of these words in the list of ingredients, it still fills you up.
Yeah, the gospel isn't something that you understand anyway. It's something that gives you understanding of yourself, and that's just Luther 101. So the gospel makes you true, makes you new. It happens to you. It comes upon you. It's an event. It's not something that is. It's not like some special content that's there. And so that's why people have encountered God, the good news or gospel or whatever in church history in all different understandings. That if you line the understandings up, they don't even all line up. If you have them all talk about it for a long time, it's not even going to all make sense.
So, Tripp, this is why from time to time in the show, I have bucked against the idea of theology, that ancient definition that it's faith-seeking understanding. I have always tried to get people to understand that the theological endeavor is a second-tier discipline. It's a reflection on the activity itself. It is not the activity itself.
Because the gospel is not our own activity. I mean, I think so. It is in that sense. Like, but I don't know. Okay, so the 2 things that drove me kind of frustrating in there is one, the elitism thing. So yes, theological discourse is elitist, but guess what? It's way less elitist than it's ever been in church history. You want to know why? Because right now, half of the people that talk about it are of a gender or race that weren't allowed to talk about their understanding of God, get it published and heard. So, like, even if getting a PhD means your vocabulary is bigger and everyone, your friends at church may not understand you, you have to say that if you 50 years ago, the, quote, progressive theologians still gave God genitalia and still did not ask the underside their experience of the faith, it is less elitist than it's ever been. That doesn't mean it's good. You want to know one of the other ways it remains elitist? When the only people ever hear or learn about it are ones that are getting degrees and getting in debt or doing it all full time. This is precisely the reason we do the podcast. Is so if you happen to care, you don't have to pay anything. You can download hundreds of episodes of the people everyone else pays to go in debt to and listen to them talk about their best books. Like, I know people that listen to podcasts hardcore and have better ideas than friends that have debt from going to seminary because they actually wanted to learn and we're giving it out for free. And there are other places that are doing it too. Like, this podcast is precisely one of the main goals is to make theology a less elitist activity. So it's not like we're sitting here and asking you to send in your transcripts before you download it and blah, 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 that kind of thing. So I think that one of the problems that the church has had is it's like it kept its head away from the body most of the time. And one of the things I want to do is to spread it out more. And I think we tend to gain things.
Look, I have friends who are medical doctors who, when they are talking about something, unless they decode it for me, I don't even know what they're talking about. They use such big words. I have friends who are auto mechanics who I have zero idea when they're telling me about what they did yesterday. Plumbers, if you go into Home Depot and you go, for instance, in the plumbing aisle, there's these little classes you can take on like Saturday morning about how to do something. Well, it's basically the same thing. So in every area of life, there are conversations that are happening by those who are thought leaders or practitioners that use a set of vocabulary that is inside jargon, right? But all of a sudden, when it comes to matters of faith, because everyone can have faith, all of a sudden, then theologians who use jargon or a big vocabulary are elitist. But no one says their plumber's elitist because, he or she knows the difference between this joint and that solder compound. And I mean, things that the normal, the average person has no access to. It's a part about being a specialty.
And I also think that some people, if you went to a school and lived there, you realize that you actually learn to think theologically by immersion, not by like reading the textbooks very much. Like you learn by actually getting in conversations where everyone has more knowledge and more vocabulary, and you hang out with those people, and then you start to think bigger. You're reading books and going to class, but you learn by being immersed in a community of people that have a larger total like wealth of the tradition and ideas and stuff that they're regularly engaging. And so like part of I think the podcast has been, there are people that don't go to a seminary but then spend a couple hours every week in nerd world, and they get more familiar. Like Mickey Jones is an example. Like, at Wild Goose, we had conversations that were not, that assumed she had picked up way more than when she, the first list of words that she had sent in, like, what does this mean? And so I think part of it is just by immersion. And you get fun. You have a lot of fun nerding out and trying to get hold of things, and then theology starts to make more sense.
So, Tyler, I see what you're saying, because when Tripp and I do get fired up with whether it's caffeinated or hopped up or whatever it is, and sometimes we're having so much fun that we do throw around things like the Pannenberg approach or whatever. And yes, we could, if we disciplined ourselves, we could pause and try and bring people up to speed on that. So yeah, concede that point. But the other stuff, I don't know.
Well, but here, I think it would be fun if, like, the challenge is, how does a progressive person tell the gospel? That is a lot more challenging than telling us it's supposed to be simple. That's like, I think you who are you telling it to makes a big deal, but the gospel, like, how do you tell the gospel in a simple way? That's a lot harder. And then to me, trying to communicate the gospel is a difficult task versus talking about something, because you're not in charge of the gospel. Like, you can give testimony to the hope that's within you. That's kind of, and you can try it a bunch of different ways. But I think a lot of the church, what it wants to do, and being able to kind of own the gospel and possess it, is it reduces it. It makes it. It takes one expression and then makes it the only one. And then, because they want to be able to understand it, hold it, and have it, and they want to be able to give it to someone and know they got it. And be it your atonement theory or like some evangelism technique or whatever it is. And I think one of the insights that comes by reflecting more critically and deeply about your faith is that the gospel, it gets opened up, and whatever understanding you had initially that you received, you find it's much more alive. It's a rupturous thing to encounter the gospel, because it breaks the understanding of yourself and the world and God and all these things that you had, and then it opens it up to whole new levels of newness. Yeah. And once you start to see that kind of robustness of the gospel, then it is simple in a sense, because it's an event, but it's complex in that it's coming that makes it the gospel, not the account afterwards. And theology is trying to give an account of something.
Yeah. Tripp, when I was a young minister, I got nominated to go to the Billy Graham School of Evangelism, and that was a real privilege for me, and to go and learn how to present the gospel in a simple way. And I love that stuff. But, if they're into food, this is a food analogy, when a really elaborate meal has been prepared and, different ingredients brought and put down with some mastery in front of you, you recognize like the artistry that's involved in making cuisine. But if somebody said, look, at the end of the day, food is just about calories. It's just about filling you up. So all you need is meat and potatoes, maybe a little buttered bread on the side. And I would say, listen, have you ever made bread? Because it's not easy. It's a complicated process. You ever grown a potato? Because I have. It takes a while. You ever harvested an animal to put the meat down on that plate? Because I have, and it's messy. And you ever made butter? Because I have. So that little meat and potatoes, bread and butter analogy of keeping it simple is not even in itself simple. That's where I get a little... I'll give a little pushback, is that what we call simplicity is the end product of a very complicated process. And I think theology is the same way, that the simple delight of a nourishing meal or idea, what looks simple on the plate, it was very complicated to get it onto the plate.
So we can go to another one because...
Call number 2.
All right, well, this is... I requested a shout-out from... a new podcast I've been listening to, and they called in. So deacons, listen up and check this out.
Hi, I'm Victoria Reynolds Farmer of the Christian Feminist Podcast. We're a new bi-weekly podcast exploring the intersections of Christian theologies and feminist politics. If that sounds like it might be your kind of thing, subscribe to us on iTunes, like the Christian Feminist Podcast on Facebook, check out notes from past shows at christianhumanist.org, or drop us a line at christianfeministpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks, and we at the Christian Feminist look forward to hearing from you.
There you go.
Sweet. Yeah, you've been telling people about that show, and everyone I know who has tuned in has really liked it. Johnny Russell let us know that he enjoyed it. Our friend who puts out the Unfolded podcast, Jesse Turry, he was a late adopter, but he said, man, he's really liking.
Well, there you go. So I think y'all should head over there and check it out. All right, so here comes a call for you, Bo, right here.
Hello, Homebrewed Christianity. This is Jonathan Conrad. I am a pastor at Grace Lutheran Church in Thomasville, North Carolina, and I am also a proud deacon of Homebrew Christianity.
What?
I am calling you to see if you guys can talk about Marxism through the lens of theology. Yesterday I read a brief article on Rush Limbaugh comparing the new Pope's comments to Marxism, and so that got me to thinking about where does Marxism fit into theology. And of course I don't agree with Rush Limbaugh. Well, that's not a surprise, but I just thought, in dealing with people at my church who may bring it up, how do I talk about it? How do I talk about Marxism, maybe socialism, or other things that are labeled on people from the other side when they don't agree with one another? Anyway, you guys are doing a great job, and hope to hear more great stuff in 2014. Take care.
Man, these calls have come out of the gate like a shot. We just got into the deep end of the pool fast.
Yeah, well, so Joseph Conrad.
Oh, my goodness.
A Lutheran minister out in Thomasville, North Carolina. That's right near where my wife grew up. Is wanting to know what to make of this. So if you have had your head under a rock recently, Pope
there's a new pope.
Yeah, his name's Francis.
B,
he's
a bit controversial.
He's a bit controversial for saying out loud what is official Catholic social teachings of the church.
You know, people don't know that though, Tripp.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
That's the funny part.
I'm like sitting there going like, no, I mean, he's like just a really cool conservative Catholic. Like he's still, I mean, it's the nicest way possible, backwards on women's issues and sexuality and all that kind of stuff. He's just he's like loving about it, as loving as it gets by,
But he did something so flagrantly antagonistic.
Yeah.
In his address, when he dared to critique what is the biggest religion in the world, global capitalism. Now, John Cobb says that global capitalism is the first truly universal worldwide religion.
Economism.
And the Pope dared to poke the hornet's nest by critiquing some aspects of global capitalism, and people went ape shit.
Yeah. And
I mean, that's a theological term.
yeah, it is. It is.
What happened?
So what happened was the Pope puts out this large pronouncement about the joy of the gospel, right?
Well, if he had just talked about that, he would have been fine.
No, because the gospel includes dignity for all humans in
I don't
in
know
the planet.
about that. I think the gospel is simpler than that.
And so here's what I had a
I'm
really
poking
fun.
you now.
I really had a really fun podcast where a little blog post where I took out all the stuff and came up with questions that I would have asked the Pope and used his own quotes to answer it.
That was clever.
I know. So, but it's also an easy way to get to some of the quotes where you hear why people were all worked up. And so when he was trying to talk about the global situation currently, the quote says, the Pope says, in quotes, "In our time, humanity is experiencing a turning point in its history, as we can see from the advances being made in so many fields. We can only praise the steps being taken to improve the people's welfare in areas such as healthcare, education, and communications. At the same time, we have to remember that the majority of our contemporaries are barely living from day to day with dire consequences. A number of diseases are spreading. The hearts of many people are gripped by fear and desperation, even in the so-called rich countries. The joy of living frequently fades, lack of respect for others and violence are on the rise, and the inequality is increasingly evident. It is a struggle to live, and often to live with precious little dignity. This epochal change has been set in motion by the enormous qualitative, quantitative, rapid, and cumulative advances occurring in the sciences and technology, and in their instant application in different areas of nature and life. We are in an age of knowledge and information which has led to new and often anonymous kinds of power. Just as the commandment, 'Thou shalt not kill,' sets a clear limit in order to safeguard the value of human life, today we also have to say, 'Thou shalt not,' to an economy of exclusion and inequality. Such an economy kills." Now, that should not be wonderfully shocking, right? That he says you actually have to look at the effects of the economy. And today, inequality is growing, that even in some of the more affluent countries, disparity between the rich and poor is growing, that the number of people getting the poor side of the system as it's currently arranged is problematic. And so what really set Rush Limbaugh off, who is, of course, like a wonderful Christian theologian. And
oh, no.
Yeah.
Now we're going to get sarcastic.
Pope says, "In this context, some people continue to defend trickle-down theories which assume that economic growth encouraged by a free market will inevitably succeed in bringing about greater justice and inclusiveness in the world. This opinion, which has never been confirmed by the facts, expresses a crude and naive trust in the goodness of those wielding economic power and in the sacralizing workings of the prevailing economic system." Now, there's always been a Catholic social teachings from
talk about this,
the last 30 or 40 years have always insisted that capitalism, is better than communism.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have this picture in the West, I think, that the Catholic Church is down with democracies and global capitalism because it was against the kind of the USSR kind of thing. Well, the thing is, the Catholic social teachings recognize that economies are more morally challenged than individuals. That as a community, human beings can produce greater ethical issues. Its immorality of a community is greater than a person. For a lot of reasons, like, right, you can make decisions as a group and not see the effects of it and that kind of stuff. A really nice person could be a part of a group that kills large numbers of people, and if they don't know it, remain naive or ignorant or whatever, or only hear the explanations of the one that thinks it's a good idea, then they could, be a person of good character with evil outcomes. So they've always thought that groups of humans together are problematic. They also have always advocated the 3 R's of restraint for global capitalism, which are regulations, which would be trade regulations between countries, regulations of workers' rights, or regulations on machine operations, children age, labor time, all that kind of stuff. So you had regulations, the rights of individuals, second one, the rights, enforcing the rights, be it the right to a living wage. John Ryan, Catholic social theorist, early 20th century in America, when we had kind of the first big move during the social gospel, John Ryan is the Catholic social theorist advocating the living wage. It's come back up because of Pope Francis and the conversation around raising the minimum wage. But the living wage was a movement that started in Catholic churches saying we need to recognize the dignity of a person and their family. So one person should be able to work 40-hour week and care for home and hearth, which means a loving home should be taken care of by one person working 40 hours a week. And so they advocated a living wage. Now, if you're a Catholic and you're sticking on all their other things, be it like no birth control and things, you better hope one person can work 40 hours a week because mama's going to be pregnant a lot. And if you are pro-family, then you want someone at home passing along the faith and stuff. I mean, this isn't like radical leftist things. They mean it for the very particular purpose of the faith is passed on better when one person works and one person cares for the heart of the family, and one person makes sure the home's cared for. And that is a dignity no system should be able to take away. So you got regulations like that are at the macro. You have the rights of the workers, and then you have redistribution. The third R, that when you are in a system where the overwhelming majority of the profit is being trapped in a small place. I don't know. Let's say like you lived on a planet where the 85 richest people had more total wealth than the bottom half of the rest of the planet, which came out this week. Then you don't, you're just like, that's wrong. So redistribution is saying that the nation states are obligated to make the wealth of the country and economy more equitable through taxation, through tax incentives, through all these other kinds of ways, so that the overall wealth of the whole economy blesses everyone and isn't stuck in certain places.
Tripp, let me just ask a basic question, because I mean, it was eye-opening to me when I first learned about the Catholic worker concept. As an evangelical, and I know not all evangelicals are non-political, but I was, who had the Luther's theory of the two kingdoms. I had really bought into that. There's a kingdom of this world, there's a kingdom of heaven. We need to be about the kingdom of heaven, and not get our knees dirty with the messy business of politics. That was for the kingdom of this world. And when I first learned about these Catholic social teachings, I was like, why does the Catholic Church even have a stance on things like regulation and redistribution? Like, why is that part of what they do?
I guess I've never thought that.
Because you grew up a little different.
Yeah, and why is it something they do?
Yeah, like why does the Catholic Church have even a stance on redistribution and regulation? Like, why is that even a part of Catholic social teaching?
But okay, I mean, I'm not trying to be snarky. The most powerful political theology is evangelicals. So even if they made you believe that giant line of BS that they're different kingdoms, your entire crew has been voting because of ethical things they only pretend to care about.
Well, they're issues voters.
Yes, but they're purchased issues voters. So this is why the question he asked about Marx is important, right? Like if you don't look at the material conditions of people and how it affects, then let's say you could be a Bible-believing Christian who believes there are two different kingdoms, and you just know that the genocide of abortion is the biggest stain on the church, and that your fear for domination by Muslims, those evil other religion, that's a big deal too. And you need to stand with Israel so that we're on the right side when Judgment Day reenacts. Therefore, you have to vote straight ticket Republican.
Not only
who's if you just look at what they pass, their main ideology is trickle down economics.
I agree with that, but the irony is that at those same circles, in those same camps, is the sentence repeated over and over again that Jesus wasn't political.
I think that's wrong.
Well, sure it is. I mean, any reading of the scriptures in its first century context will tell you, I mean, that guy got tacked up on that tree as a political intimidation. I'm just saying.
So, but here's the thing: is like Catholic social teachings have always been about the well-being of the entire community.
Okay,
and
that's what I was
be
asking.
a Christian. When Jesus says you are a light into the world and a salt and all that kind of stuff, it's saying that the community of Christians are to be a blessing to everyone that's there. And where does Jesus direct us to bless? The least of these. If Jesus says, when you do it to the least of these, you do it to me. Or if he runs around making statements that sound political and about economics all the time, we don't just edit them out of the Bible. And they want to figure out what are ways, as Christians, as a Christian community, can we advocate for things so that our society is actually impacted by the actual ethical image of the kingdom of God that Jesus is putting forth. And so the social teachings are ways of doing that. And it meant when in the relationship of nationalist nation states and capitalism, free market economies, that regulations and redistribution and protecting the rights of people, property, and the planet are essential. Now, what the Pope points out is that if the agency of power that does the regulating, redistribution, and that kind of thing is the nation state, and the wealth of the globe is being trapped not in things that the nation state can regulate, be it multinational companies and the super elite, then the people, the church, does not have a place anymore where it can exert legal power on behalf of the least of these. You can't tell, as Americans, to tell multinational companies what they need to do. They'll go to a different place and rape and pillage a different country if we're going to demand X, Y, and Z.
Right.
You can't tax them. So we have whole companies you would think are American that all their money is technically in Ireland because it's taxed at a lower percentage. And the big fight right now about infrastructure, like how can we get infrastructure spending? Mm-hmm. The right wing wants us to lower business tax rates and let people bring money back into the economy and at a very low rate, and then use that low rate to pay for infrastructure in the United States. And Rand Paul talked about it this weekend, and this is a place you probably could end up getting some compromise because obviously more progressive people want infrastructure spending because it puts people back to work. Well, the reason that's a decent idea is because large amounts of wealth isn't even in our economy. So what they're saying is there's these huge buckets of money from companies that you think are American companies, like Apple. Well, they are kind of, except that they really exist in Ireland legally and are getting taxed really, really low amounts of money and still charging us a lot of money for my iPhone. Mm-hmm. And now if we could just agree that Apple, who's hard up for cash,
right,
should get taxed 1/6 of what all the businesses of small businesses in our United States, where they're like have 10, 15 employees working hard, making ends meet, and caring for people in the family. If we could just tax them just a margin of what real small businesses get paid, then they might just move that money back in here, and we can hire some people to build roads. See, you only think that's a good idea when you don't have the political power anymore to tell the conglomerates in the economy, no, there are rights of human beings that have to be recognized. There are regulations that need to be put in place so that the consumption patterns of the first world don't impact the 2/3 world and emerging economies, because where do you think all the effects of global warming and stuff are taking place first? Well, I can turn my AC on. But if desertification eliminates a place for you and your family to grow food, then you starve. or you become a political refugee and go. You see, like
now you're going to get into immigration,
but you become a political refugee. In areas of Africa that used to be sustainable, agricultural wise, desert grows. You can't grow stuff there. So now an ethnic group that doesn't get along with another ethnic group that was all going good till global warming affects things. Now they're supposed to live together. One's moving in without land, property, and inheritance, and the other, it's their land, their culture, and stuff gets heated. And of course, like the boundaries for these countries were arbitrarily made by the West after World War II. So, like the Pope's just saying, look, we don't have there. How is it we're supposed to do good? The system we have set up doesn't let us do good. It's not saying that the economic structure is just inherently bad. His observation, which I really appreciated, is saying it doesn't work for where we are now. What he's not saying.
And this is why you're a Marxist.
No, he's not saying it's all horrible, and he's just saying right now the way we work is it's not producing good for all now, and that's what our job is as the church. Good for all. So he goes on and says that while the earnings of a minority are growing exponentially, so too is the gap separating the majority from the prosperity enjoyed by those happy few. This imbalance is the result of ideologies which defend the absolute autonomy of the marketplace and financial speculation. Consequently, they reject the rights of states charged with the vigilance for the common good to exercise any form of control. That's what I just said. I was explaining the states are no longer able to do the 3 R's. This new tyranny is born, invisible and often virtual, which unilaterally and relentlessly imposes its own laws and rules. So what he's saying is when the church recognized the beauty of the nation state, and the Catholic Church came around to it, Protestants tended to be on its side because it meant they weren't getting killed early on. Its observation was the nation state became a place where a non-religious power could still have moral virtue imposed on the civic order and the economic order. But the center place of power was something everyone participates in a democracy. When political power is the center power, and we vote and that kind of thing, then the people actually have input. What he's saying is, while we were asleep, the center of power moved to the global capitalist market, so it doesn't care what your politics are doing. And by the way, we might purchase it if you really need us to. And so that's the observation. You see, he's not saying capitalism is always bad, horrible, and ugly, and crap. And he's not saying that it hasn't done done good things in getting large portions of people out of poverty. See, a lot of when Joseph sent the message, I've had those conversations, and they assume that if you're critical to capitalism in the way it works now, that you're going, it's brought more people out of poverty than blah 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 blah. The Pope's like, yes, great. Now let's just talk about what it's doing now. And his observation right there is the thing that I find so amazing, because he's saying that the center of powers moved to out of the nation state, so the people who are morally formed can't stand up for the common good anymore because they don't get to make decisions.
Yeah,
is that to me it seems obvious, but
no, it's helpful. But the part of the problem is it's such a big picture. So I just want to back up a second and take it down to, right to the surface, put our feet on the ground. So, my mentor is Randy Woodley, and in his book, Shalom in the Community of Creation, which, by the way, I have an interview coming up with him over on the Homegrown Christianity series. But one of the things he talks about is that, Jesus had these tripartite formulations about who we're supposed to care for, like the widow, the orphan, and the stranger, right? Or you might say the foreigner or the alien, or the hungry, the poor, and the prisoner. Right? Like Jesus said, these were to be our concerns. So you would think...
Not debt speculation.
You would think that Christians who simply read the Bible and listen to what Jesus said would say, Jesus commanded us, it is a primary concern for us that we care about issues that orphan, widow, and the alien, the foreigner, right, the traveler, that these are things we deeply care about, or the hungry, the poor, and the prisoner, and that this is a primary concern for Christians who follow Jesus, right? So you would think like this would already be on our radar somewhere. But then this really strange thing happens in this media political climate we have, which is the Pope makes this declaration. And Christians who have not kind of imbibed in this tripartite thing that Randy's talking about, care for these issues, say, that's crazy talk. And why is the Pope even talking about this anyway? And by the way, he's Marxist and capitalism. We should trust it. And why do you think that reaction has been, that backlash has been so pronounced from people who probably call themselves followers of Jesus?
It is, and in our friend Jorg Rieger's talked about this on the podcast before, but there really is it's ideological when you believe that the invisible hand is moral. And just to point out, because some of us do economic philosophy for fun, or in grad school, Adam Smith thought you had to do the 3 R's too. So if you ever read his second book that he was working on when he passed on laws and ethics, he points out that indeed you were going to need to assert rights, redistribution, and regulation. So the free market pioneer thought these were necessary. So it's not an aberration to the system to assert this. And so when someone uses the label Marx to dismiss, I find that to be, but Rush uses liberal to do that too, right?
Or feminazi.
Whatever. So, I just don't get the how that's not just seen as, well, there must be something there because this is a complete dismissal, right? When you say something like that, you haven't said no content, and you're saying to a bunch of Christians, "Hi, I make millions of dollars on my fourth marriage, and had an illegal drug problem that I sent a illegal immigrant overseas to get my drugs for me. My name's Rush Limbaugh, and yes, the Pope is Marxist." And
we should start. That would be a good Saturday Night Live skit.
Why would you take him wonderfully seriously? Is the thing. And I know people do, and he could be totally, right up your ideological alley on a lot of things. But I'm just saying, if you have to which one is not like the other when it comes to who might know what Jesus said and how it might relate to the given context. Second thing is, this Pope's actually not a Westerner. So, he has watched how the economy and at home changed as our supposedly liberal president Bill Clinton changed NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, and then ends up changing our relationship with Mexico, which then has substantial impacts. On how
we just celebrated the 20th anniversary of that, by the way.
I know, which just so you get it, the critique he's making is not therefore Obama's good. He's making a point out that actually the center of power plays both parties to do whatever they want, right? So, and by the way, that center of power is now screwing your own citizens. That was the other part, he said, even in the rich countries are getting it, right? So you can ruin millions of people's retirements plan, break the law, and no one goes to jail for it. And every Sunday talk show is Hillary is the progressive candidate. And, economically, you can't tell a huge difference between a Clinton and a Bush. So, there's just not a huge difference. So to me, it's just people just don't understand. I think when I hear Christians today get mad about the Pope, I think they're just scared that a Christian who's not a European or a Westerner gets to tell them something. They're just from where? He gets to wear the little hat and tell me stuff? No, Marxist. No,
Wow.
Because it's not abnormal. How many theologians have you read from South America?
Like maybe 5.
Now, I've read 19 because I knew we were going to talk about this, and so I went and looked how many Latin American theologians I'd read. 19, and not one of them says anything that makes me think they disagree with this observation of the Pope.
Interesting.
So here's a question: if our brothers and sisters around the world who are being affected by our inability to follow through on our ethical convictions as a church, because we're no longer able to even influence the system of power so that it cares for the poor and the marginalized, the outcast, the widow, and the orphan, then shouldn't we pause a little longer? And please don't say that it's Marx. He's another Western thinker. Just heads up. It wasn't like he was rocking out in Brazil coming up with his ideas. He's a Western philosopher. So to me, there's a sense in which that this should not be, that when we use those labels that way, we're really just saying the West is one more time refusing to look itself in the mirror.
I think that there's something really simple behind this, because what you've put forward is a pretty big accusation, and you might be right, but it is a big accusation. Let me just ask a simpler question.
What's the big accusation, though?
About
that the Western Church just doesn't care what the other parts think, and how it affects them,
right?
What's funny is even our oppressed, the economic poor in our own country, they're in the church, don't care. like we have people that are being economically abused,
right?
And just can't even imagine things going better,
right? So let me ask this in a little bit different way. What is it about the words inequality and disparity that are so threatening to the powers that be, the status quo? Because in the State of the Union address, it has come out that President Obama, who, by the way, is the worst socialist in the world. I hate when people call him a socialist. As a dual citizen with Canada, I can tell you that guy is not a socialist. You don't know what socialism is if you think that guy's a socialist. Anyway, inequality, but it has leaked out that he is going to spend the majority of his State of the Union address talking about disparity, and it has people's hackles up. Before we even have the State of the Union, people are already furious that he's going to spend time talking about disparity. So, Tripp, what is it about those two words, inequality for the Pope and disparity in President Obama's upcoming address, that get people so frazzled?
I think it's because part of protecting your privilege is insisting that the system is in good shape. And so saying disparity or inequality and getting mad, it would be like someone coming in and saying, hey, fellas, how about a homebrewed marathon? We're like, oh, sure, we could always do a marathon. That'd be great. And we just sit around talking about how you and I are marathon runners. And then and saying disparity or inequality is like someone going, so I don't know if you've thought about this, Bo and Tripp, but y'all should possibly get on a scale before telling everyone that you're a marathon runner. When was the last time you ran 5 miles? Because, marathons are long. And we're like, screw you and your scale. You don't need a scale. We're freaking marathon runners. Like one time in high school for 3 months, I was in shape and I could have done that. And Bo used to be a football player. So whatever. Back in the day, it might have been possible. We could not confirm nor deny that it was, but still, we aren't getting on a scale. So I think that's what it is. It's like the ideology is going, don't you dare hold a mirror up. And here's why I'm slightly concerned that Obama's doing this. Because we found out that he has used the NSA to spy and infiltrate the Occupy group. So Occupy was basically doing the same thing. The 1%, right? And, oh, no, we're going to use NSA and legally tap these people, plant people, and go in and figure out what's going on. So when you recognize that there is a groundswell of experience, be it on the left and the right, the Tea Party and Occupy both are populist uprisings that look at the system and go, whatever. I don't believe either of any of this agenda. So like when the person who is running the system, right, then decides to talk about those themes, it's getting a little fishy. Because if you're shutting down the group that's putting it on the front page, and at the same time then taking the discourse, then what are you doing? You're straddling the energy of people around it and putting it at the wrong place. And I think that's one of the things that the Pope does that freaks out anyone in power in our country, because there's a whole lot of people that go to their priest every week. And when Papa Popey says, hey, when I talk about inequality, I'm actually talking about your brothers and sisters in Argentina and not your little game of American politics.
Wow.
So you see how it gets heard completely different when a non-Western representative of all of the Catholic Church says, hey, guess what? Jesus has a suggestion. And I think the fear of the powerful they had of Occupy and the Tea Party, like the Tea Party got bought off by right-wing groups that then want to organize them to their own economic advantage. Occupy gets run out too. So the Catholic Church is really hard to logjam. And so finally you have a community that's fidelity isn't even to the nation state that it's coming out of. It's the church itself, right? That has people all over the globe.
Okay.
That is making the observation. That has to be more threatening to the system than the populist observation from the right or from the left. This is from the body of Christ. That's why I like the Pope for that reason, because the body of Christ that he represents is someone that is responsible for people on all different ends of this.
I just think it's interesting that the critique after the Pope's address wasn't that the head of that branch of the historic church was sounding like its founder. It's that he's a Marxist.
All right, so I never really got around to doing this, so I brought my notes. So I was saying,
we only have a couple minutes left, so go.
Since we're not going to get around to another call.
Yeah.
So Joseph Conrad, he said, so what about Marx? Like, what do we have? Like, if we are actually going to respond to the Marx thing about Marx and not just say, the Pope's not a Marxist. Best reply, though, he said, but I know some good ones. I thought that was so good. He's like, I'm not a Marxist, but I know some good ones.
Nice.
That's a funny line. Anyway, I thought I had like 7 things that I thought that Marx observed that would be helpful things.
Okay.
If you're trying to go, here's something.
All right, this should be a good way to close.
All right, so Marx basically observes that the secret of capitalism is the shift in identity from what you are in a society to what you own or what you have. Ooh. So, and Randy Woodley has said this on the podcast before, that if you go up, like you're hanging out with the native peoples and your first question is, so what is it you do? Their answer is, well, I'm of this tribe on this land, and go on this, and you're like, whatever. So what is it that you do? Yeah. And he's like, well, I have 6 generations, and he goes through, like, this is how he answered the question. And he said, I love just like watching someone get frustrated. No, like, how is it that you make money? What car do you drive? Where did you go to school? Yeah. And what brand is your underwear? Is it tagless Hanes, or is it even nice? But Marx said, this is what it does.
Yeah,
is it shifts your identity. And that is a thing that Christians should get.
Yeah.
Marx is an atheist Jew, and he, like Jesus is a good Jew, says we only serve one master. Mm-hmm. Who is it that tells you who you are? What you do and what you have and the function you play in the economic system, or whose you are.
Mm-hmm. Tripp,
That's not a crazy idea.
Yeah, I loved that you invoked Randy Woodley there. I actually got to have breakfast with him this morning. He had a layover in Los Angeles, and I just want to assure everybody that while he is a Jesus-y evangelical, Native American indigenous theologian, not a Marxist bone in his body.
No.
So when he says that, he's not. I mean, it's just, you can't dismiss everybody, right, who would critique capitalism as hurtful to especially communities and just say Marxist.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
And just so you know, Marx actually had more nice things to say about capitalism than negative. So, like, I always ask people, like, well, when was the last time you read Capital? Anyway, all right. So number 2 is capitalism reduces human needs to those which can be bought and sold in the marketplace. This is an observation he makes, and a lot of us would think about it, know it's true, but really don't spend much time talking about it. But how is it, if you watch commercials, Super Bowl's coming up, it will, in the commercials, every human need will be discussed. And the answer to each human need is going to be Bud Light, perfume, a car, something you can buy or possess.
Or snack on.
Yeah. And how do they sell it to you? With something that is a real human need. So last year there's a Super Bowl commercial, and it flashes through a person's whole life. From baby to first love to holding their own child and on a rocking chair, holding their partner's hand and watching grandkids play. At the end, there's freaking McDonald's arches. So, which is it that is a real human need? I know, loving community that's sustained throughout your life. Humans need that. Brought to you by McDonald's. So Marx is just saying, and there's lots of other ones, right? That that capitalism wants to take our needs and make them bought and sold. And all right, so next one, that capitalism produces from nature more technological abilities than in all of its history. So if you think of feudal societies, right? Mm-hmm. Relationship to nature, very different than when you start pulling out resources and producing more that are there. Mm-hmm. You have a whole new relationship with technology and natural resources in capitalism when you become industrial. And what does it do? Natural resources, there's no variable for the planet in capitalistic economic theory. Like, you don't get to go, we're harnessing the energy that we receive from the sun for millions of years and burning it. And
6,000.
6,000 years old planet. The dinosaur bones that Satan planted. Anyway, there's no variable for what is being harvested from the planet and then the outcome for it. And we get more and more efficient at harvesting. So one of the ecological crisis, one of the things is there's no ecological variable in capitalism, and yet everyone is stuck with the output. So what Marx is doing is saying what we're not accounting for when you have your normal variables is that part of what you are using is something that used to be shared by the community, nature, and that the output of that relationship to nature could be negative to everyone, but only a few people are getting the benefits.
Mm. So before you read point number 4, can I just clarify what's going on here? Are you exegeting Marx in a Christian way?
I was pointing out his observations so that, these are ones that most Christians, I think, would get as...
No, I
could pick other... If at the end you want me to list off 6 things he thinks that no Christian's going to find reasonable.
No, I just want to make sure we are clear about what you're up to here.
Well, his answer was what is in Marx that's good. And I think these are all things...
No, it's good.
That Marx thinks that
sometimes
a Christian should...
I just like to name it.
Okay, so the next one is... the relationship of planet and technology and the humans and only having needs that can be purchased. It creates a contradiction because the imperative of the economy is to make a profit and to fulfill continuously produced needs. And so the driving function of our economy is to continuously create needs that then can be met while creating a new need. Mm-hmm. Because all of our needs have to be purchased ones. So while you're trying to constantly have new needs made and met, because they're simulating a real need, community, or being grounded or at home and that kind of thing, then they end up getting played out in this kind of sick system while you're not knowing your relationship to your real needs or our relationship to our real community or our relationship to the real planet. And that cyclical cycle is the problem. And it gets worse and worse.
Now, just before you could move on to the next one, in last week, my interview with Leah Costomo, she has a great segment about consumerism, and she pulls out an old quote, I think it's by Mary Daly, about how desire is artificially stimulated within capitalism.
Yeah. And
it's a good...
And coming up, the first Thursday of February, we're going to have a little Hobbit party online.
I heard.
And in the new Hobbit, you actually see the conflict of these desires. So in The Hobbit, you have the end of the first Hobbit movie, right? Bilbo is coming back, has the ring on, and they're all coming out. He just jumped over Gollum, and the rest of them did that big escape from the Goblin King and that kind of thing. And they're like, "Where's Bilbo?" "Oh, he left." And then Bilbo takes the ring off and gives Thorin the hug or whatever. And at the end of that story, he says, "Why are you here?" He goes, "Because, I know where I'm going when this is done because I have a home, but I want to help you get a home." And so he has recognized that there's this bond of this community, this friendship, and he's become a part of it.
Interesting.
There are people without a home. Then at the end of the next movie, when they get there, and Bilbo is self-giving, going in to meet the dragon and stuff because he too wants them to have what he has back at home in Hobbit Town, the kind of thing. The desire for this one stone pollutes the mind of Thorin. And you see this conflict, and you see Bilbo looking at him. He's like, "You're worried about a freaking stone? Like, you are right here, possibly able to have your home again." Blah, 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 go on. "You realize what I've done?" And he's like, "But where's that stone?" And so I think there you see, like, a Tolkien who is also kind of exploring these themes, exactly how perverse these desires toward the wrong thing can perverse the most beautiful things. Community, desire for home and place, and being situated, in your native land, that kind of stuff. So anyway, Marx, when he's looking at the way ideology function, says that if you want to know how someone thinks, look at their surroundings and look at their possessions. So when he wants to give an account of something, he says, look at the material reality. Mm-hmm. So when someone tells you that they're a Christian, and you go, and they say, "Hey, pastor, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "You'll love your neighbor as yourself." "Well, I already did that." "Well, then, the 10 Commandments? List them off." "Yeah, I got that." "Well, then sell all your money, give it to the poor, come follow me." "Oh, no, I'll get a new rabbi." So what Marx is saying is, if you want to know the truth of someone, don't listen to what they think. Look at what they do. Where do you spend your time and where do you spend your money? And then you'll know what matters most to a person. And our economic system has created false desires that we invest our time and energy and careers in getting desires that are never met, so we actually end up ignoring the things that are most important. You and I are both ministers to people who are very successful in our economy. Mm-hmm. And I've never met one of them that said to me, "You know what? I think my real problem is that I need to be making $2 million a year." Now, every week I talk to someone who said, "I just don't know when I'm going to get to have a long conversation with my husband again. I don't know when I'm going to find time to talk with my daughter who's in high school struggling with her image issues. And as a dad, I really need to figure out how to show her what love looks like." Or what they're saying is, right, I know these things are important because I'm talking to a minister and this is supposed to matter, and it does matter to me. Kind of. Because there are these other desires that are actually what I do.
Sure.
And that's not a crazy leftist thing to say. But Marx is pointing out, if you want to know the truth about something, look at what they do, look at what they have. How you spend your time, how you spend your money, and how you get your time and your money tells you the truth about someone. That's not crazy. Jesus said the same thing, right? When he talks about money, do you want to put stuff that moths get to, or do you want to put it somewhere else? Anyway, But he makes that point and looks at how does it work in our economy. Next one is the moral and philosophical dilemmas need to be understood in terms of being different for different classes. He said,
That's a tough one.
but when you say what is good,
Yeah.
it gets heard very different depending on where you are.
Sure, but one interesting thing that in my studies has come up that I think is really bears some weight is that in the American myth, when we moved away from a British stratified class system, the part of the myth was that everyone has access to everything. If they pull themselves up by their bootstraps, if they'll apply themselves, right? And we don't like to look at class. And it's one of those things that comes with the American myth is that no, we don't have like the British do, like a House of Commons, a House of Lords, a king. We moved away from that. So we don't have royalty and commoners. We're just all Americans. And so when you bring up issues of class, it really does undermine what many people have bought into, a version of the American myth. It really gets to it.
Well, we also don't have, we're just Americans practically. Because if you live in an urban environment,
but it's the ideology.
You're significantly underrepresented, right? California has 2 senators. There are more people that we could spit at than live in Montana.
Well,
and
easy.
they get 2 senators.
Montana's a beautiful state.
Yeah.
Pick some other state.
Well,
let's go Idaho.
Whatever. No, it's not a negative thing about Montana. I'm just saying that our class system is actually it privileges certain cultures, namely rural ones and the Southeast. So, like even after the last census, when we reworked our representatives
again. That gerrymandering of election maps is great.
But my whole point is like we may not have a class system, but we have a very big cultural one, right? So, and
well, it's not an official pronounced class system like you would have like in a caste system like in India, but they're definitely this issue of class is as real as any other issue that divides us.
Oh man, so one of the times. I can't remember who said it, but I was in a class or was listening to it, and the professor was like, "So, some people go, oh, we're in a classless society, and and while different people benefit more from what they do now, but there's kind of just a general class because most people are middle class." He goes, "Here's an experiment. Your whole family, it doesn't work for 1 year. Do you still eat and are in a house? If the answer is yes, you're rich." And I sit there thinking like how many but if the answer is no, then it's a way of understanding wealth. It's a way of class connectedness and that kind of thing. And I was like, oh yeah, that's I could tell certain people would not, and certain people would. But anyway,
all right, let's finish up.
The last thing is Marx said, don't let your life be reduced either to poverty or to work. And so his critique of capitalism is both for those in poverty, and he says that, there should be preconditions being met for human life like food, shelter, healthcare, freedom, and pursue goals beside work. But it's also not just for the poor, it's also for those that are working. When we have desires that are created by the market and then fulfilled, what we call success are people whose reality is determined by what they have and what they do. And he goes,
sure.
To be human is so much more than that. So why should we let the most powerful thing that organizes our society, that now at this point, if the Pope's correct, tells our political system what to do and tells our religious system, don't talk about this or I'll call you a Marxist. Why should we let that system be in charge? Because we're way more than what we do when we work. And in fact, when you're on your deathbed, what you're going to be smirking about isn't your 401k. And so it's not just the poor that are bound in Marxist kind of critique of the system. Everyone is. And an example of this, a couple of years ago, I was talking to a person who's in a leadership position during the economic crisis. at one of the banks, and he was having to eliminate large numbers of people from the ranks because they're trying not to go under, haven't had the bailout thing come through, and all that kind of stuff, and he feels horrible about it because he knows the effects it's going to have. He also knows why the stuff went down, and it's kind of ethically shady, and they knew it eventually happened, but they didn't know how not to do it because the other people were doing it, and if they didn't do it, then their investors and the president wouldn't get the same returns as everyone else was getting. And he didn't know what to do because he knows how it's going to affect all his workers when he lays them off, but he can't not lay them off because then essentially he would get axed and someone else would do it. And he's sitting there completely in fear, sweating, and trying to Tripp, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And he said, it's as if I'm possessed and this is going to happen anyway. And if I don't do it, someone else is going to do it. Because what's going to happen in the destruction of all these people's lives and careers and people's retirement plans is already decided. And I was a part of it, but I felt like I had no freedom in it. That is what, and this is, a person of privilege didn't lose their job and that kind of thing. But Marx is saying, if your system does that to people, do you really want it? And I think that what Pope Francis is saying is, and I'll read this last quote because this was actually the part that made me stop. Because he said, human beings are themselves considered consumer goods to be used and discarded.
Ouch.
What Christians going to posit? We have created a disposable culture which is now spreading. It is no longer simply about exploitation and oppression, but something new. Exclusion ultimately has to do with what it means to be a part of the society in which we live. Those excluded are no longer society's underside or even its fringes or the disenfranchised. They are no longer even part of it. The excluded are not the exploited, but the outcast, the leftovers.
Ouch.
And it's when you get to a place like that he ends up saying that that we've created new idols that are saving of the economic system. Wall Street, but not Main Street, is like worshiping the golden idol. His
like a golden calf?
Yeah, like he straight up just...
Like a giant bronze bull statue?
Something like that. It was.
Interesting.
But he said that the current financial crisis can make us overlook the fact that the crisis itself originated in a profound human crisis, in the actual denial of the primacy of the human person. We created new idols. The worship of the ancient golden calf has returned in a new and ruthless guise in the idolatry of money and the dictatorship of an impersonal economy lacking a truly human purpose. The worldwide crisis affecting finance and the economy lays bare their imbalance and, above all, their lack of real concern for human beings. When the human is reduced to one of his needs alone, consumption.
Well, on that note, we should probably say we would love to hear your feedback, your thoughts, your pushback, your concerns, your questions. Just go to the SpeakPipe, click on that little microphone on the right-hand side, and send us a little message. We would love to hear your thoughts, and we can return to them on a future Theology Nerd Throwdown. Tripp, in closing, I have 4 words for you.
Oh.
Ontology, metaphysics, epistemology, prehension. I just don't want it ever to be said that we went a whole Theology Nerd Throwdown and didn't use those words.
I know. Well, finally, it can crest as well. And,
all right.
Well, as we proleptically anticipate the next Theology Nerd Throwdown.
Well played, sir. Well played.
All right.